Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm happy to present my second video about the Canon R8. In case you missed it, I've already published an in-depth comparison between the R6 and the R8. You can find the link in the description below. However, in this video, we're looking into how the R8 compares against the R7, a powerful APS-C camera offering remarkable performance at a competitive price point. Just a quick reminder before we begin, if you're interested, you can subscribe to my newsletter where I share insights about my work and the additional gear I have the chance to test. The newsletter link is also available in the description below. Alright, so without further ado, let's begin. Let's take a look at the two cameras side by side, the R7 APS-C camera on the left and the R8 full-frame camera on the right. And you can see right away that the R8 has a more compact design compared to the R7. Both cameras feature weather sealing, although it might not be as advanced as what you can find in premium Canon models like the R6 series. The R7 has a slightly taller grip, which makes it easy to rest all your fingers comfortably. The R8 offers a decent grip, and to be fair, I found it easy enough to handle the camera even with the 100 to 500mm lens. Moving on to the physical controls, there are notable differences between these two cameras. First, the R7 features a single lever serving as both the power switch and the video mode switch. On the other hand, the R8 has a dedicated photo-video lever located on the left side and an independent on-off switch on the right side, which also incorporates a lock function. By the way, the R7 also has a lock function, but you activate that with a button instead. Second, the R7 sports an autofocus manual focus lever located at the front of the camera with a function button at the center. It is a clever and very useful addition. Third, let's talk about the rear dial. On the R7, it is more prominent and positioned on the rear panel rather than on top, as seen on the R8. Furthermore, Canon has incorporated the autofocus joystick right in the middle of that rear dial on the R7. At first, I wasn't particularly fond of this solution because I often found my finger touching the dial or joystick by accident. However, after owning the camera for several months now, I've got used to it to some extent. While there are still occasional moments where it catches me off guard, it doesn't bother me as much as when I first started using the camera. Unlike the R7, the R8 doesn't incorporate a joystick for the autofocus point. Instead, you have the option to either configure the four-way pad at the rear to directly move the autofocus area, or you can use the touchscreen. Furthermore, the LCD allows you to adjust the f-point while composing through the viewfinder, an option that is also available on the R7 by the way. The APS-C camera comes with 12 customizable buttons while the R8 offers 10. It's worth noting that if you choose to use the four-way controller at the rear to adjust the f-point on the R8, you will lose 4 of these function buttons. The menu system remains largely consistent across both cameras. Furthermore, the My Menu section and the option to edit the Q menu provide additional flexibility for customization. The two cameras share an almost identical viewfinder, which is not the standout feature of either model. They are small and the magnification is a bit limited. For people who wear glasses like me, seeing the entire frame, particularly the corners, can be challenging. However, a positive aspect is that they offer a fast refresh rate. As for the rear LCD screen, it remains identical and is flawless really. High resolution, responsive touch capabilities, and the added convenience of a multi-angle mechanism. The R7 can accommodate two SD UHS 2 cards conveniently housed within a dedicated compartment on the side. Having two cards enables you to expand your storage capacity, create backups from one card to another, or keep JPEG and RAW files separate. On the other hand, the R8 offers only one UHS 2 slot. Accessing the card requires opening the battery compartment located at the bottom of the camera. Another distinction lies in the battery. The R7 uses the larger LPE6 battery, while the R8 is powered by the smaller LPE17 unit. The battery performance of the R7 is very impressive. Even after capturing over 2,700 images of birds in flight, a substantial 78% of battery life remained. In contrast, the R8 managed approximately 1,000 photos of birds in flight, along with a few recorded movie files, before the battery life dropped to 25%. In terms of movie capabilities, the R7 recorded 2 hours and 20 minutes of 4K 25p video at the maximum quality before the battery died. In comparison, the full frame camera only managed a short duration of 34 minutes in the same conditions. Moving on to the physical connectors, they are the same. With either camera, you get a remote input, a microphone input, a headphone output, a micro HDMI output, and a USB Type-C port which works at 10 gigabit per second. Both cameras are equipped with Canon's multifunction shoe, which offers multiple options, including the ability to record digital audio using compatible accessories. It's worth noting that neither camera officially supports an optional Canon battery grip. However, a few third-party alternatives might be available. For convenient charging or power supply, the R7 and R8 can be connected to a compatible and high-current power bank via USB. However, remember that if the camera is turned on, it will receive power but won't charge the battery. The R8 features a 24.2 megapixel full-frame sensor, whereas the R7 incorporates a smaller but high-resolution 32.5 megapixel APS-C sensor. Both cameras feature a low-pass filter and the same Digic 10 image processor. Our first test revolves around sharpness using the same lens for both cameras. The R7 produces more defined and smoother details, although the difference may not be as substantial as initially anticipated, considering the megapixel gap. It's possible that the R7's low-pass filter is stronger than the one fitted on the R8. Next, we have dynamic range, and we start with a balanced exposure where both cameras retain a very good level of details in the shadows and highlights. However, the raw file of the R8 is more clean in the darker regions of the image, whereas the R7 shows a bit of noise already. With a more extreme exposure recovery in the shadows, the limitations of the R7 sensor become more apparent. The noise increases and a subtle color cast emerges in contrast to the R8. In terms of highlights recovery, both cameras demonstrate similar capabilities. The ISO settings are different, as evident from this table, with the R8 offering a wider range. As expected, the R7 exhibits extra noise as you increase the ISO levels, with the distinction becoming more apparent from 3200 ISO. The R7 remains usable at 12,800 ISO, while the R8 maintains acceptable quality up to 51,200 ISO. Moving on to straight-out-of-camera JPEGs and skin tones, you can see that with the standard style, the R7 has more yellow, whereas the R8 leans more towards reds. Switching to the portrait style, the R7 delivers a well-balanced result in my opinion, while the R8 shows subtle hints of magenta. With the neutral style, the R8 strikes a better balance this time, whereas the R7 tends to veer towards yellow. Both the R7 and R8 come equipped with Canon's dual-pixel CMOS AF2 technology. They also feature an advanced algorithm designed to identify and track various subject types, ranging from people and animals to vehicles. The R8 incorporates a more advanced iteration of this software, enabling the camera to have a better understanding of the human body. Additionally, it can detect a wider array of animal species and more types of vehicles. Let's start with my subject detection test for humans. Under good light conditions, the R7 achieves an outstanding keeper rate of 90%. Only one image was out of focus, occurring as the subject turned around, along with a few images where tack sharpness on the eyes was slightly compromised. The R8, on the other hand, elevates the performance with a remarkable 96% success rate. There were no images being out of focus in the sequence, just a few shots where the eyes were slightly soft. Jumping into 4K 25p video, the performance stayed pretty consistent. The R7 has a minor hesitation during the second part of the test as the subject turns around before coming to a stop, but it's not a big deal to be honest. In low light, the R8 seems like it's got the upper hand on paper thanks to a better official rating, minus 6.5 compared to minus 5 stops on the R7. So that's like a full stop and a half in favor of the full frame camera. Indeed, the R7 faces more challenges in this low light scene. It successfully tracks the subject from start to finish, even when she's walking through the darkness in the middle of the sequence. However, there is a lack of precision, resulting in a keeper rate of 72%. On the other hand, the R8 sustains a performance quite similar to my initial test, with an impressive 90% hit rate. Only a few images are slightly soft in the sequence. However, in movie mode, the performance is the same. I used the RF 7200mm f2.8 for these two tests, and it's an impressive lens when it comes to autofocus speed. So keep in mind that with a different and less expensive lens, like the RF 85mm f2 for example, the keeper rate will decrease a little as you can see from these results. In low light, the difference in performance is more significant, especially with the R7. I've had the opportunity to use both cameras during a few concerts, and I can confirm that the R8 holds an advantage. Its subject tracking capabilities and eye autofocus precision are truly remarkable. It's rare for the R8 to miss focus despite the lighting design changing constantly and the performance moving a lot on stage. The camera didn't struggle even when dealing with musicians wearing costumes and masks. Now, don't get me wrong, the Canon R7 is more than capable in the same situation. However, subject tracking can be more unpredictable at times, especially when performers are moving a lot and they aren't always facing the camera head on. So, there might be a few moments where you prefer to work with a smaller autofocus area and disable subject tracking. When it comes to animal detection, both cameras perform really well. They are fast and reliable. The bird is detected right away, even when at a distance, meaning small in the frame. Focus is very accurate also when the bird is surrounded by distracting elements, branches, leaves, or when they are in a less favorable position for the camera. If you manage to walk closer to your subject, the R7 and R8 will switch to the head or eye as soon as possible, increasing your chances to get tuck sharpness where it matters the most. They will revert to the body or head if the eyes are not visible. Finally, we have my birds in flight test, and this is where the R8 truly shines. Its autofocus score is impressive and matches that of the more expensive R6 Mark II, and it's only a single point away from the flagship R3. The performance is very quick, tracking is always precise and consistent, even when the subject is against a busy background, and the camera almost never hesitates or gets confused. The R7, however, struggles more in maintaining focus throughout the sequence, more often than anticipated actually. The autofocus can lock onto the target very quickly, yet it can just as quickly lose focus when the bird is against a busy background, shifting focus to the surrounding trees or field. Other times, the R7 struggled to readjust focus if it began the sequence out of focus. This occurred frequently enough that I often had to abort the sequence and start again. All this behavior also lead to an inconsistent keeper rate unlike other Canon cameras I've tested. Replicating the same keeper rate with every attempt is difficult. The best I achieved was 80%, but more frequently the R7 averages around 70 to 75% despite using the same lens, same settings and working at the same location in similar conditions. For this video review, I tested the R7 once more, experimenting with more setting combinations, but unfortunately, the performance remains unchanged. The R8 has a maximum shutter speed of 1/4000 of a second with a mechanical shutter, while the R7 goes up to 1/8000 of a second. Switch over to the electronic shutter and both cameras reach a speed of 1/16,000 of a second. Now, here's noteworthy detail about the R8. It doesn't feature a full mechanical shutter. Instead, it uses an electronic curtain at the beginning of the exposure and a mechanical curtain at the end. This mechanism is known as electronic first curtain shutter, or EFCS for short. On the flip side, the R7 offers all three modes: a standard mechanical shutter, an electronic first curtain shutter, and a full electronic shutter. The absence of a full mechanical shutter on the R8 can impose some limitations, and they can be more noticeable when pairing a fast aperture with a very fast shutter speed. For example, you might get distorted bokeh when working, say, at f1.8 and 1/4000 of a second. With the same settings, you might also notice an uneven exposure where one side of the image appears slightly darker than the other. Additionally, and that is regardless of the aperture or shutter speed, there can be some banding with artificial lighting, although it's not as visible as with the standard electronic shutter. Now, I won't delve into an exhaustive explanation about these matters since I already talked about it in my R6 versus R8 full comparison video. If you're interested, you can check out that review where there is a dedicated chapter to this topic. The link is in the description below once again. Moving on to the drive speed, the R8 really kicks into high gear, capable of shooting up to 40 frames per second when using the electronic shutter, which is quite impressive. However, with the electronic first curtain shutter, the top speed is 6 frames per second only. On the R7, you're looking at 30 frames per second with the electronic shutter and 15 frames per second with the mechanical shutter. No doubt, the electronic shutter is where you get the fastest performance on both cameras, but the R8 takes the lead in minimizing rolling shutter issues. When panning, there's less distortion as you can clearly observe. The faster sensor readout on the R8 makes the camera safer to use for action shots, particularly when taking photos of complex subjects like birds in flight. These subjects have more intricate body shapes compared to straightforward objects like lampposts, making any resulting distortion less noticeable and generally not a significant concern. However, with the R7, the distortion becomes more evident. During my review, I noticed an anomaly in every 3 or 4 photos. The distortion is especially visible in the background, as you can see in this example featuring the hide and the tree trunk behind the red kite. And by comparing these two other images, you can see how the background wobbles when I switch back and forth between them. Additionally, there can be some weird motion blur with the R7 when image stabilization is activated, even with Mode 2 set on the lens. My opinion is that the movement of the sensor shift mechanism highlights the rolling shutter problem. So in situations like this, just opt for a safe shutter speed and disable the stabilization, something many photographers tend to do anyway. Of course, it's worth noting that you can use the mechanical shutter and work at 15 frames per second with the R7, which is far from disappointing given the resolution of the sensor. However, if you're interested in the R7 fastest burst capabilities, you need to be aware of rolling shutter more so than with the R8. Moving on to the buffer performance, the R7 maintains a pace of 30 frames per second for approximately 2 seconds before slowing down when capturing raw images, or about 4 seconds with JPEGs. The R8 offers the same buffer duration as its 40 frames per second burst rate. You can improve these results by selecting Compact RAW on each camera. Another noteworthy detail about the R8 is that while shooting at 40 frames per second, it makes lengthy pauses of 6 to 7 seconds before resuming the burst for 1 or 2 seconds at a reduced speed. Another way to improve buffer on both the R7 and R8 is by using the raw burst mode. This can be paired with a pre-release function wherein the camera preloads 15 frames before the shutter button is fully pressed. It's a valuable function for capturing action that's difficult to anticipate. Keep in mind that with this mode, the camera saves all the frames into a special RAW file format. This file can only be opened using the Canon software. Alternatively, you can extract the images within the camera itself. However, in both cases, whether you're using the desktop app or the camera, you can only save individual files one at a time. Both cameras are capable of recording in 4K up to 60p without sensor crop, albeit with a different method when it comes to image processing. Let me explain. The R8 employs oversampling from a 6K area, which means it uses every available pixel to deliver optimal quality across all the available frame rates for 4K video, so from 24p up to 60p. The R7 uses the same approach but only up to 30p, oversampling from a 7K area because it has more pixels to begin with. For 50p and 60p, it uses the line skipping method, which means it literally skips lines of pixels, and that leads to a decrease in quality. Here is an example first recording in 4K 25p, so both cameras are oversampling and they deliver excellent details. The R7 appears slightly sharper, although the difference is not very significant. When moving to 4K 50p, the R8's footage has better quality due to its continued use of oversampling. On the other hand, the R7 employing line skipping introduces more aliasing, leading to less smooth and refined details. To get better quality in 4K 50p and 60p on the R7, you could select the 4K crop mode. However, this results in a substantial change of the lens's angle of view, not to mention that you are using a much smaller portion of the sensor. In Full HD, the high frame rate mode on the R8 allows recording up to 180p, while the R7 stops at 120p. Both cameras share a range of advanced settings, including the capability to record internally in 10-bit 422 when selecting the Canon Log 3 or HDR PQ profiles. The maximum bitrate stands at 340 megabit per second. They offer a clean 10-bit 422 output via the HDMI port, although there's no RAW option available. Surprisingly, the R7 performs really well in terms of dynamic range. With the C-Log 3 profile, it holds its ground against the R8, preserving very similar level of shadow and highlight details. In video mode, the ISO range is different from the photo mode, as you can see here. Unsurprisingly, the R7 exhibits more noise, which becomes visible from 1600 ISO and more pronounced at 3200 ISO. The R8 remains very good even at 12,800 ISO or even 25,600 ISO for challenging situations, whereas the R7 quality really deteriorates at those levels. The R8 can go all the way up to 102,400 ISO, but the amount of noise is too invasive at that point. Rolling shutter is less pronounced on the R8, similarly to its performance in photo mode. The distinction becomes more evident with fast movements. Now let's talk about overheating. During my testing, the R7 sustained continuous recording for 2 hours and 20 minutes in 4K 25p at the maximum quality before the battery was completely exhausted. In comparison, the R8 has a limit of 2 hours per clip, but is capable of recording this full 120 minutes without any problem. In 4K 60p, the R7 can record for roughly 60 minutes before reaching its operational limit. The R8, however, comes with a 30-minute limitation per clip, and in my test, it stopped after 23 minutes the first time and 28 minutes the second time when I did my test again the following morning. Also noteworthy is the clever overheat indicator on the screen of both cameras. comprising 10 bars that gradually appear to warn you about the rising internal temperature. This provides ample warning prior to any complete shutdown. An important difference between these two cameras lies in the absence of in-body image stabilization on the R8. With a full-frame camera, you must rely on lenses with optical stabilization or a good old-fashioned tripod, of course. Fortunately, a substantial number of Canon lenses come with stabilization, and this holds particularly true for the new RF lenses designed for DSLR mirrorless system. On the other hand, the R7 offers 5-axis sensor stabilization rated at 7 stops of compensation, and that becomes 8 stops with the expensive RF 50mm f1.2, a lens many of you probably won't buy for this APS-C camera, I would imagine. Without a doubt, the R7 delivers superior capabilities for handheld photography when using slow shutter speeds. As you can see, I achieved a commendable keeper rate even with a 2-second exposure. However, the test unveiled a surprising result for the R8, or perhaps I should have said for the RF 24-105mm f4 lens. Despite relying solely on optical stabilization, I successfully took sharp images at 1 second. Beyond this point, the gap between the R8 and the R7 narrows, and their performance remains comparable from 1/4 of a second onwards. Naturally, the outcome can vary based on the lens you pair with the R8, and you'll always be reliant on a lens with optical stabilization for the full frame camera, while the R7 itself can always provide stabilization regardless of the lens used. In terms of video, the R7 delivers steadier footage when walking with the camera. The R8, on the other hand, struggles to minimize movements using optical stabilization alone. However, when it comes to static shots using the RF 7200mm f2.8, it's the R8 that records more stable footage. Both cameras offer the option to activate digital IS, which entails electronic stabilization. Although this results in a sensor cropping, it can improve the performance, yet the outcome remains consistent. The R8 offers better stability, while the R7 struggles a bit more. I encountered a similar issue with the R7 as I did with the R6 and the 7200mm lens. There's an occasional lack of consistency in the performance. At times, it seems like the optical stabilization and the sensor stabilization are in a battle, leading to more unexpected jerks in the footage. Wait 5 to 10 seconds and it becomes more stable. Depending on your location, the prices of these two cameras might be quite close, particularly when considering the US market. For each camera, you can expect to add around 200 to 300 bucks respectively for the kit lens, and this gives me the opportunity to explore the topic of lenses a bit more. Canon has introduced 3 native APS-C lenses for the EOS R mount so far. These lenses offer a versatile zoom range and a compact size, but they are entry-level with smaller, non-constant apertures. If you need more options, such as more telephoto capability for wildlife photography, wider angles for architectures, or faster apertures for portraits, you will need to look at the EOS R full-frame lenses. Fortunately, there is a variety of fast prime lenses available at competitive prices, along with affordable super telephoto options. However, if you seek fast standard zoom lenses, for example, the cost can rise significantly. Another limitation is the lack of third-party autofocus lenses directly compatible with the RF mount. It's still unclear if and when Canon will license its mount to third parties. The latest interview released at the time of finishing this video is quite vague, but then some rumors suggest that the first lenses are coming soon, so it's still a bit unclear and confusing to be honest. What's very clear, however, is that we still have a significant distance to cover before reaching the range of options available for other systems such as Sony. Of course, if you want a better selection, you can consider Canon's and third parties' DSLR lenses, so those with the EF mount. There you get a much longer list to choose from, and the good news is that the EOS R to EF adapter works exceptionally well. I haven't covered extra features in detail, but I can briefly mention that both cameras offer a range of useful functions. For instance, they both include focus bracketing and focus stacking in camera, and they work quite well. They can also serve as cameras for streaming with just a USB cable, eliminating the need for additional software. The dual pixel RAW feature is also present, allowing you to make small adjustments to the focus point in post production. And then they come with Bluetooth, Wi Fi, and a time lapse function. And that brings us to the conclusion. So the price is relatively similar depending on where you live, but otherwise, these two cameras are very different. The R7 has superior ergonomics, a larger grip, a bigger battery, more physical controls, and supports dual memory cards. It has a smaller APS-C sensor but offers a lot of resolution, a highly effective 5-axis image stabilization system, and very good video quality in 4K up to 30p. It is one of the most competitive APS-C mirrorless cameras on the market, especially when you consider its price. On the other hand, the R8 may lack a bit in terms of design and ergonomics, but its full frame sensor delivers the expected advantage in image quality, especially with dynamic range and high ISO performance. It also provides superior quality in 4K at 50 and 60p. Another substantial distinction lies in the autofocus capabilities. While the Canon R7 delivers commendable results across various shooting conditions, the R8 excels across the board, whether it's portraits, events, wildlife, or fast paced action like birds in flight. The R8 delivers exceptional performance at a level akin to the flagship Canon R3, all at a fraction of the price. Another aspect worth highlighting is the rolling shutter issue with the R7. While this might not be a concern for everyone, and that's fair, it can limit those of you who are particularly enthusiastic about making the most of the camera's fastest drive speed. In contrast, the R8 lets you utilize the faster burst of 40 frames per second with more peace of mind. Okay, that's a wrap. So thank you very much for watching. As always, I would like to remind you that if you're interested, you can subscribe to my newsletter. The link is available in the description. You'll also find my R6 versus R8 comparison in case you haven't watched it already. And please feel free to leave your questions and comments below. I'm always happy to answer you and engage in nice conversations. Please remember to like and subscribe. And until next time, take care and goodbye.